Well, President Ramaphosa has signed the Electoral Amendment Bill into law. It essentially allows for independent candidates to contest for provincial and national elections. The presidency is saying it marks a significant milestone in the evolution of our democracy. Well, let's hear from Electoral Systems Researcher at My Vote Counts. It's always good to have Letlhogonolo Letshele, joining us this morning. And is this something you would agree with at My Vote Counts? Some are suggesting it's going to just complicate an already complicated electoral system. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I think it's going to complicate things simply because of how it looks. It's unconstitutional, and I've said this quite a few times. So it was a shock to me and to us yesterday when we found out that the president has signed. We thought that he was going to refer the matter back to Parliament or to Concord simply because of how the bill is set up. So what we're seeing with this bill is that there's quite an unequal competition between independent candidates and political parties. So they are meant to contest sort of on the same level and territory, and it's going to be difficult for independents. So what we're seeing is that, for example, for the National Assembly, we've got 400 seats. So political parties with this bill are eligible to contest all 400, while independent candidates only contest 200. So what happens is that once an independent candidate gets the number of votes that they need for a quota, for instance, if the quota is 45,000 for a seat, if they get any excess votes on top of that, they will be discarded. So what happens is that the proportional representation becomes distorted because the will of the people will not have been represented, because a lot of people would have voted for that person, but only a small chunk of the votes make up the seat and the rest are discarded. I think that's the biggest issue that we have with the bill that's currently have been enacted as a law.
Yeah, many critics in the build-up to this potentially getting signed, Letlhogonolo will agree with you, saying that what's happening now is you're diluting an already very big pool of options for South African voters. And the problem is, as you say, with proportional representation, first past the post, if you will, no one's going to be voted into a position where they can actually get anything done, because you're going to have little pockets of votes, and now you're bringing independence into this as well. Is there a way to fight this if you wanted to go that far? It's been signed into law. I mean, it's really a done deal, or have I got that wrong?
Not necessarily. It's actually a good thing for civil society that wants to litigate against the matter, because they were just waiting for it to be signed, and only now that you can challenge it in court. So what we're going to see is some people, especially the people that actually took the matter to court in the first place, which is the new nation movement. So we're going to see civil society taking the matter to court to challenge it on this basis that I mentioned, that it presents an unequal competition between independent candidates and political parties. You would remember that in the judgment, Madlanga said that whatever electoral system that Parliament comes up with, it needs to ensure that independent candidates are able to contest fairly and equally. So that's the first thing that we're seeing not happening. And the other issue was that the system needs to ensure that, in general, we have proportional representation. So two things are not happening with this bill. So that's enough grounds for civil society to litigate. And another issue would be the public participation process. I was actually shocked to read in the president's statement that he is satisfied with the public participation process, which we feel was inadequate. The bill was introduced late in Parliament. People were not able to critically engage with the content of the bill, and hence we have this bill because it was not really coupled with people's thoughts and opinion, and it's going to be very difficult to get it back to the public again for them to endorse and understand.
And I imagine as well this is going to become quite complicated, not just from the actual ballot that South Africans will potentially have to try and sift through whilst busy standing and voting in the middle of blackouts as well. I suppose the issue is also going to be, before you even get onto the ballot paper itself, I would imagine there's fairly stringent requirements which political parties have to go through. They have to pay their fees to register as a political party, but now with the independent candidates coming in, what sort of requirements and screening process do you imagine there could be to sort of narrow down the quality of potential independent candidates?
It's going to be a very complicated process, because with independent candidates, they're required to get 15% of the previous quota. I made an example that you would need, for instance, 45,000 to go votes to get a single seat. So you would need 15% of that in the form of signatures. So that's like around 6,000 to 7,000 signatures from people in the region that you're going to contest as an independent candidate. You would know that political parties that are in parliament now, they only were required to get about 1,000 signatures. So that's one of the unfair issues that I allude to. So we raised this as an issue. So what Parliament did was to say also political parties that are going to come in as well are going to be required to have the same. So new political parties coming in will also be required to get 15% signatures of the threshold. So these are new things that are coming up as we get up to the 2024 elections, and independent candidates and political parties need to be aware of. So the IEC will make a determination in terms of how much independent candidates would need to put forward as a deposit to be able to contest. We do not have this information as of now.
Yeah, it's been one of the criticisms of this in the build-up to the Act being signed into law is that anybody with enough money and has an interest can now suddenly find themselves contesting for a high office in South Africa. But you have to wonder about the timing, don't you? Perhaps this is my last question to you, Letlhogonolo, about the timing of this ahead of next year's elections. Was this really the time to get something like this signed off when already it's going to be very hotly contested next year? What do you make of the timing?
Look, it's already late. The Concord gave a judgment in 2020, and Parliament was given 2 years to complete the process. So they were supposed to be finished with the process by June 2022. So so that the IEC and also us, so we get a good grasp of the situation. So it's not necessarily because of the elections are next year. It's something that has been long coming. It would have been better that Parliament hurried with this process, and so that people get enough time to be able to be conscientized with the system. So it's not really anything malicious. It's actually even late. The IEC needed at least 18 months to be able to work with the new system. So they were actually under pressure. So they've got around a year now to be able to implement the changes that come with this act. So I don't think it's anything malicious. It's actually even late. And it's going to create even problems because people are not going to get enough time to be able to understand. So quite a lot of work is needed for people to come on board and understanding this, because it's very different. I mean, third ballot is something that we've not seen. So it's very important that people understand, because it might really affect the credibility of the elections if people go and vote the same way and then they don't see the difference of the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Voter education, I think, for this election, considering that this has now been signed in, is going to be incredibly important ahead of next year. Letlhogonolo, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. Electoral Systems Researcher at My Vote Counts. It's about to get a lot more complicated, but of course we'll try and help make sense of it to you as we get closer to elections. But we're probably about a year away. I don't know if there's been an exact date announced for the elections, not as far as I'm aware, but it must be getting pretty close to being a year away. And now you've already got all these political parties. Now you're bringing in independent candidates, which is constitutionally allowed. It's just that's how it's being done. Yeah. For the average South African, especially with coalitions now coming into play as well, it's going to be very, very complicated to try and make sense of how it all works. But we'll do our best. I promise we'll do our best.